Hello, everyone. This is Mathew Heggem. I am the Chief Business Strategist for HireEffect, and I am very excited today to be here with the CEO and Chief People Officer of HireEffect, Jennifer Scott. We're going to be talking about conscious leadership, but before we do, I want to give you a little bit of information about HireEffect so you know. HireEffect provides bookkeeping, recruiting, and business consulting services with the motto, people first, technology forward. I love that motto. I'm a tech person, but I love people first. I get it. And Jennifer is also just a really amazing human being. I've been working with you for 4, 5, 6 years now. It's
off and on for a long time.
Yeah.
Every day since 2016.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Boom. There you have it. So you know, I don't work with people I don't love. So she's amazing. She's incredible, and I'm super excited to highlight her work as the CEO of HireEffect, because when we talk about conscious leadership and we put that in the context of conscious capitalism, oftentimes I'm asked by colleagues in the community, well, who's actually doing this work? And not just on the sort of big business level, you know, like Whole Foods, for example. We know them as an example. Their CEO wrote the book, but really on a small business level, when it comes to having 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 20, 30 employees, that range, what does it actually look like? So we're going to dive into that a little bit with Jennifer. But before we do, Jennifer, can you just give us a little bit of background? Who are you? Where do you come from? And what's sort of what brought you here today? Let's do that.
It's an interesting question, and one that I'm actually quite proud of. So it's a journey. And it continues to be a journey every day. And what I'm learning actually through my commitment to conscious leadership is enjoying the journey without really knowing the destination, but we can get there later. So I started just like everybody else, well, maybe not everybody, in corporate America. Worked for large corporations, public companies, worked for small companies, and then really decided that I'm not thrilled about corporate. I really love being able to make quick decisions, being able to try things, being able to try new things. And so I started my business in 2007. And I went from your typical corporate recruiter type person to a solopreneur. And loved that. I worked with contractors when I needed to. I worked directly with my clients all the time, every day. And then I went sort of back into more of a partnership role for a little while. And given the journey and some circumstances, became CEO overnight. And here I am. And so I'm learning to really appreciate and enjoy that journey. I don't know what the destination is, but that's kind of how I got here.
That's cool. Yeah, I love this idea of investing in the journey, not obsessing over the outcome, you know. And I was fortunate enough prior to this video interview for you, Jennifer, to share your vision board with me, which I thought was really cool. So I'm going to highlight it. It's actually hiding there in the back corner for those of you. Yeah, there it is. Which is actually, I want to talk about that for just a moment, because you know, surrendering to the journey, right, which I think is a term that I've borrowed recently from a book I'm reading, Maston Kipp's Claim Your Power. It's an awesome book. And there's this whole section in there about, you know, surrendering the outcomes and just sort of letting go of what you want to happen or expect to happen or think will happen, because the truth is you don't really know what's going to happen. So how do you sort of do that, right? How do you as an entrepreneur accept the journey that you're on? I mean, you've got this vision board. Clearly there's things you're trying to accomplish, but that area in the middle is so unknown. What are some ways that you go about navigating that journey?
So that's also been a journey. And it changes. So being introduced to conscious capitalism by you in around 2016, I started to explore what that would look like for me. And at the time, it was a relatively new concept in terms of being an actual thing, but it wasn't a new feeling for me at all. And so that is really where the journey started, and I've been learning the tools as I go along. So one of the tools that I think is super important that I've learned actually is being happy with who you are, living in a state of abundance, and committing to excuse me, committing to experiencing always having enough.
Mm.
And whatever it is enough. Whatever I am, whoever I am is enough. Having that, coming from that mindset has really shaped sort of how I get there.
Mm.
And that changes, right? That changes every day.
Mm. That's beautiful. Yeah, it does. And I think, you know, what it sort of highlights for me, and you said the H word, right? Happy, right? Which is actually a perfect lead in to my next question. You know, I know that we as entrepreneurs really sometimes, you know, oftentimes we have to look inside ourselves to address some of the most challenging problems, but sometimes we also look outside to get inspiration on navigating our path. And I know that one book in particular has been an influence to you, The Happiness Advantage, as it relates to how you really practice or understand conscious leadership. So can you say a few words about that book and how it's played a role in your framework?
Sure, absolutely. So Sean Aker is the author of The Happiness Advantage, and he's a positive psychologist, researcher, I guess. He's a happiness researcher, which I think is really cool in itself.
Right? It's a cool job.
Right? Especially, you know, going back, like I was a psychology major, so this is all stuff that resonates with me. And I love how he presents the research in a really, really fun and sometimes very funny way in this book. But he lays out tools that can really help you be happier in your life, be happier at work, be happier in general, and then sort of shows you through this research how that gives you an advantage. And so it's called the happiness advantage because being happy actually gives you several legs up. It turns out all the research shows that happiness is contagious. That when you have a positive outlook, and it's not to say that you're not realistic. You know, it's not to say that you don't realize that some things don't make you happy. It's how to deal with those things in a way that will allow you to still be happy in spite of them, or sometimes maybe even because of them. And so it really has changed a lot of how I think. I'm learning to, and in the process of retraining my brain, to find that happiness and to be able to live in that happiness space and live in that state of abundance and be able to share that with our employees, with our clients, with my family, with, you know, with everyone. And that's how I'm learning and growing in enjoying the journey.
That's cool. Yeah, I just started that podcast myself, so I look forward to diving more into it with you.
It's just fascinating, the little things that you can do to really retrain your brain.
Yeah.
You know, I've always sort of had this gratitude practice, you know, looking for the things that I can be grateful for in any situation. I took that to the next level after reading The Happiness Advantage. You know, I've always been involved in some sort of meditation practice. I took that to the next level after reading The Happiness Advantage. Learning about what Sean Aker calls the 20-second rule in the book, which is a great way to retrain your brain to do things that you wouldn't necessarily feel come naturally to you. Like in his example, instead of clicking on the TV when he comes home, you know, he can now pick up a book just by putting the batteries to the remote control 20 seconds or 30 seconds away in another room.
That's a smart trick.
It really, I mean, it's just such a cool the book is awesome. I've read it
Yeah.
like 3 times. I've actually started to highlight it. It's become my new Bible. Like, I just don't go anywhere without this book.
That's funny. Yeah, because I remember when I introduced you to Conscious Capitalism, I treated the Conscious Capitalism book as like a textbook, and I had it all marked up.
Yeah.
And now you're doing that with this book, which means now I have to read that book, and I can't just do the audio. I'm gonna have to like buy the books. I can
You're
actually
gonna have to buy the book, and there's a workbook that goes with it.
Really? Oh my God, you've got me on work. Okay, done. Easy. All right. Well, that's cool. So that's a great tip for all of you out there who are on this journey of conscious capitalism and trying to understand maybe another perspective or a way to take it 1 step further or 3 steps further. So check out the Happiness Advantage. Now, another topic I want to sort of dive into with you a little bit, Jennifer, is really your role as a woman and as a leader in an industry, right? I know that you and I have spoken at conferences before. We've talked to other leaders to help them unlock their potential. And I think right now, from my perspective, I'm sort of tuning into conversations on how gender identity informs the conversation on how you show up in certain environments. And some of the research I was recently doing was actually interviewing women who had made the top 100 list in the accounting industry. And I know you've played in this space and have worked in this space. So I'm just sort of curious, really what your thoughts are on the power of women as leaders in industry, be it accounting, be it recruiting, be it mechanics or science or engineering, whatever it is. What is that thing that you think women leaders have that really changes the conversation?
Wow.
That's a big one.
That's a big one. And, I don't know that there's a single answer to that. I think it's a whole host of answers to that. And I think some women do things differently than I do. And, so I don't want to put that out there as sort of this big generalization, but I've surrounded myself purposefully with women who support one another rather than women who feel the need to put other women down to feel better or stronger in an industry or in a world where, white men rule, right? Like, that's this thing. And I don't live in that world. And I choose not to live in that world. It's one of the reasons I left corporate. So I think it's really important to surround yourself with people who will lift you up, people who will support you, and people who are just as passionate as you are in whatever their thing is. And I think that's true for anyone. So I try not to look at myself as specifically a woman in industry. I'm a business person. I happen to be female.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I take power from that because I surround myself with other women who I think feel the same way.
Yeah, that's makes sense. And I think part of the challenge here is, what does it mean to be a woman, right? It's like, okay, but fine, then what does it mean to be a man? But then what does it mean to be anybody? And then you just like, right, and then it turns into that whole thing. What's important, I think, maybe from my perspective to note, as a man, I know that the attribute or the characteristic of being nurturing, right, that is, well, on one hand, something that I think comes naturally to women, because you if you have a child, you take care of that child. There's a relationship or a bond that you form that is about nurturing that little creature that just came out of you, right? And then as a culture, there's historically been, at least recent history, this perspective on women being the ones that nurture and men going out and killing things and like doing all, and the point is like wipe those sort of stereotypes away. At the end of the day, we all have the capacity to nurture someone or to be nurturing, and I think maybe the benefit is that women have been doing it, and in spite of the fact, and it's maybe a part of a culture that men have not fully embraced or understood.
Yeah, and I think it's culture. I think it's it was very interesting in the interview that you did, the last interview that you did that we posted. Shalonda Ingram was talking about these labels that society puts on people,
Mm.
and they're simply made up. And
Mm.
that concept really inspired me to look at
Mm.
that label and whether or not I live the label or I live my authentic self.
Mm.
And if you wipe out the label, and you take our culture out of the picture, and you
Mm.
go back to the animal instincts, um, women were amazing hunter. I mean, the female
Mm.
tiger. I mean, look at this, right? So like, look at the female lions. They're the. I mean, it's different. We've created this dichotomy that doesn't need to exist in
Mm.
in being human, in being in our culture. Um, Not all cultures are the same.
Yeah.
We have put this label on women, we put this label on men,
Mm.
um that I just, it's arbitrary.
Yeah.
I mean, it came from somewhere. It's not 100% arbitrary, but we stated it, we defined it, and now we live in it. It's
Yeah,
man.
even and live in it in its limitations. And I think that's the power of the opportunity to open up the conversation, because
Right,
then you realize, oh, well, when we talk about conscious leadership, we're
right,
becoming more conscious of the possibilities that exist in our framework of understanding how we relate to other people in our organizations and in our community and as stakeholders. And that we have a much broader range available to us as human beings, right? It's like human potential is really what it boils down to,
yeah,
but recognizing that there's a whole scope of emotions and intellect that's embedded in all of us. It's just a matter of bringing that skill forward and utilizing it effectively in your work. So yeah, I appreciate that insight. So we're getting close to time, but I do want to wrap up with sort of a final question before we do a plug for an upcoming event. So, clearly you've been practicing conscious leadership. It's something you've been thinking about, you've been researching, you've been informing yourself and bringing that to HireEffect, and subsequently you've been to conferences, you've spoken about this stuff, you're bringing it out into your own world in your own way. For aspiring or emerging conscious leaders, what advice do you have for them as they go out onto their journey or embark on their first steps in the world of conscious capitalism?
I think the most important step throughout the whole journey is the willingness to become very self-aware. And that's not easy. um, Being open to looking at yourself truthfully, um, and learning from your opportunities to improve, learning from your mistakes, not dwelling in the past, looking
Mm.
forward, right? You're not going that way, go this way. um, it's a lot of introspection.
Mm.
It's a lot of work. But I don't think that it's entirely possible to be truly a positive, conscious leader without doing the work on yourself.
Mm.
It's very powerful to understand what makes me tick, what my hot buttons are, to pull a phrase from a colleague yesterday, um, to learn to be happy, to learn to live from a place of abundance, to track the things that I do every day.
Mm.
So you mentioned, earlier, the steps to get to the place you want to be that's highlighted in that vision board, right? It's hard to know what the steps are to take. I've recently been working with a fabulous person. His name is Dan Greenwald, on something that he's developed, which is called 30-10-0.
Hmm.
And it's fascinating to me how that works, where you sort of depict your 30,000 foot, like what's the big goal, and then what are the 10,000 foot pillars that you need to sort of hit that goal, and then what are the action items in each of those pillars that you need to do every day to be operating in your peak state to get to that 30,000 foot goal. And that was, I mean, putting my mind together, my plan together was eye-opening and fascinating, and learning about myself, and then tracking my day-to-day. Am I hitting those? Am I achieving those things that I've set out for myself? And if I'm not, what's blocking me? How can I be operating in my peak state all the time so that I can be the best leader for again, clients, employees, family, community? It's been a really fascinating journey. But it starts with being willing to become very self-aware.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate it. So before I let you go, I just want to do a quick plug for an upcoming event. Here in DC, we're very lucky to have HireEffect as one of our partners and sponsors for an event called The Power of Spiritual Entrepreneurship, Fundraising and Scaling with Purpose. This event happens on Wednesday, March 13th from 6 to 8 p.m., hosted by the Center for Spiritual Entrepreneurship and the Church of the Holy City. It has an incredible panel, including the Reverend Richard Toffel, who's an impact investor, Aparna Sain, who's my colleague at Conscious Capitalism DC, and a mindfulness educator, and Shalonda Ingram, an omnipreneur and founder of Nurture Project, as well as additional panelists who are soon to be announced. So if you're in DC, the DC area, please check it out. If you're not, Little Birdie tells me we might be live streaming it, so TBD on that one. I'm sure you'll see an announcement on HireEffect's website if that is actually the case.
Definitely.
Right? Yeah. And maybe we will, just for you, specifically you, Jennifer, because you're awesome. But otherwise, thank you again, Jennifer, for being here. We are honored to have HireEffect in the business world, and we appreciate your work as an example of conscious capitalism and conscious leadership. So have a wonderful day, okay?
Oh, you too.
Bye-bye.